Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today. My name is Mike Vinoy, Vice President of Marketing at Asure. And boy, this saga of the President's mandate on COVID vaccination has seen its turns. This has been a long story that has taken some interesting turns, including last Friday when the Sixth Circuit Court kind of reversed itself and lifted the stay on the emergency temporary standard, the ETS, the rules that OSHA put out to implement the vaccine mandate. So really a big news event on Friday. This is going to impact, thousands, tens of thousands of businesses. And so we wanted to jump on this and share with you the latest, including the title. The OSHA's vaccination rule goes into effect January 10th. Well, not really. It goes into effect now. It actually went into effect Friday, end of day Friday, when the Sixth Circuit Court released their decision. It's the teeth are going to come January 10th, and we can get more into that. But we've done a lot of content. We've done webinars, ebooks, blog posts on this, and we encourage you to consume all that and learn everything you can. But joining me today is my guest, Mary Simmons, and we're going to unpack the 8 new things that we think every employer really needs to know. So you guys all know Mary. Thanks for joining me again today, Mary. Look forward to another educational conversation. I always learn when I talk to you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, I'm going to try to go fast. Going to throw a couple of slides together that some of you guys have seen before, regular attendees of the show. First, I couldn't encourage you enough to jump in and see some of the reference material. We're not going to unpack all of the details of the mandate, of the federal mandate, right? And how OSHA has been the governing body to set the rules to implement the mandate. But all of the details are in the ebook, the Federal COVID-19 Vaccine Mandates, 50 Questions Answered. So that's about a 25-page document, has all the juice that you need to really understand what applies to you, what doesn't apply to you, how to calculate whether number of employees you have, locations, subsidiaries, all this stuff that you're going to need to know to see if this law even applies to you. Then plenty of guidance to how to implement some best practices around the rule. Mary and I have also unpacked this topic in a couple different webinars. You can see them on the screen here. And the first one, just when the mandate came and what it was. And then once we got, what it was about 2 months later, Mary, 6 weeks later, something like that, we actually got the guidance from OSHA. We're all kind of sitting on pins and needles until that happened. And then we had a follow-up where we unpacked OSHA's rules for how to implement. And then shortly after, I showed you guys this timeline for those who were on that show, where at the time, okay, September 9th, the mandate's announced. November 5th, we get OSHA guidance. November 6th, just, wasn't even 24 hours later, I think it was like 11 states attorneys filed suit to try to stop the thing. Fifth Circuit stands it down, puts a stay on the order. OSHA comes out with guidance, and they're appealing to the Sixth Circuit Court to lift the stay. And on the far right, we kind of said, okay, this has 3 options, I think, right? Either the court's going to say comply as it is, comply but some modified format, or it's going to get struck down. And so I think we're going to talk about what we think are next steps legally, what's going to probably happen in the courts. There's some stuff we do know, there's more that we don't. Mary, I'd look for your comment here. Probably the biggest surprise to me here, there's maybe a couple things that have been modified, but for the most part, this is comply as is decision by the Sixth Circuit. What comments would you have there?
Well, I hope that everybody did listen in to our previous webinars, and we did give some warnings to get ready for this. But yeah, it doesn't look like they changed much, if anything. It is comply as is, and again, we're still cautioning everybody to say it can still change, right? So it's still somewhat in flux, although at this point we do have to, if you're an employer of over 100 employees, you do have to comply with the order right now.
Yeah, and I think a theme that I'm going to do my best to repeat here. You've heard Mary and I say before. We don't take any political position here. We don't care if you lean left, lean right, red, blue, doesn't matter. All we're doing is trying to present the very best information we can to educate businesses to make the best decisions they can. And I think you're going to walk away here. And you probably already have this if you watch the news every night. The thing's still in flux. The likelihood of this changing, I think, is pretty high. Just as no one can see around corners what COVID's going to do to us in the pandemic, and therefore the government's responses, right?
Right.
But I think it would be foolish to not take this dead serious. The Sixth Circuit has spoken. They said it's legal. Implement it as is. And whether OSHA comes knocking on your door or not, the expectation from a legal standpoint is you must comply. It's not optional. So whether you don't comply and don't get caught, different issue. But our guidance to you is always going to be err on the side of employee safety and always err on the side of following the law. So with that, let's go ahead and just jump into the 8 things that we think all the employers need to know, Mary, and just talk about, when this thing takes effect. I kind of had a little, joke about crossing out January 10th.
Yeah.
That's when the teeth come. But this is
Right.
this is now, right? Tell us more details.
This is now, and I'm just going to add to your last comment about whether OSHA comes knocking on your door. Listen, you never want to roll the dice and say, oh, I'm not going to comply, as you just said, Mike, because OSHA might come knocking on my door. But more appropriately, what may happen is one of your employees may feel uncomfortable knowing these mandates. And if you're not complying, they may call OSHA. So is OSHA have enough bandwidth to go and audit every employer? Of course not. But if they get called by one of your employees who feels uncomfortable because they feel like you're not following this mandate, they are definitely coming and knocking on your door. And these fines are real and big. And as you said, Mike, the standard starts now. Again, they're not going to enforce it, and I'm doing air quotes here, until January 10th. And they're saying that they won't issue a citation until February 9th for non-compliance. So I just wouldn't hang my hat on that, even though we believe this is still in flux, still may be challenged. You have to take the steps that we already talked about in our prior webinars. We already instructed everybody. Find out the vaccination status of everybody in your workplace, whether or not you are going with option A, mandating that your employees are vaccinated, or option B, giving your employees the option that if they are unvaccinated, that they can test for COVID at least weekly. In either case, you should start, or should have already started if you were listening to Mike and I, to have a document. And remember, this is confidential information, so don't ask all of your managers to ask their employees. You want one point of contact. So in our case, when we're the HR consultant for our clients, we're the ones that are gathering it, putting it in an Excel spreadsheet, and making sure that it's compliant with the way that we should be gathering that information. The other thing that I want everybody to start doing is getting ready to get your policy in order. Now, that policy is supposed to be posted, and that policy there is a template on the OSHA website for you to utilize. And we are spending lots and lots of time with our clients getting that policy ready, because it does have to be customized, right? Even though it was great that they gave us this nice template, there is parts of it that have to be customized for the client. I just caution you, don't take out information. You just want to customize it for your organization. But those things I would do right now, along with choosing whether or not you're going to ask everybody to be vaccinated or give the testing option. It needs to be done right now, Mike.
You said something really important here, that the way to, because most of people have most businesses has probably not had an OSHA incident. Maybe if you're in construction manufacturing, maybe you deal with it in ways that, say, a clothing retailer or a restaurant doesn't. But don't think about this as somebody's knocking on your door to do an inspection. This isn't the policeman on the side of the road with a radar gun trying to catch you doing something bad. We know that we have a diverse employee base. We know we live in a, at this point in time, a somewhat divided country, that people are going to have very strong personal opinions on this topic. And it's going to be an employee who doesn't like the way you're executing this, that might not tell you to your face. They're going to be the ones that calls OSHA, not OSHA knocking on your door. So again, we're always going to fall back to our guidances, err on the side of employee safety, err on the side of following the law. And so forget January 10th. It's December 22nd, and this thing has been in effect for 3 business days already. So
that's right.
Topic.
Yeah, and I will add that as in many laws, this mandate has a non-retaliation discrimination piece to it. So employers also need to know that that has to be included in the policy, and they have to make sure that no one is retaliating against somebody for calling OSHA or for going internally and saying, hey, I don't feel safe here because you're not having the unvaccinated people wear masks. So that is part of this mandate. Your unvaccinated people must wear masks. And the CDC right now is recommending that everyone wear masks out of, abundance of caution. But certainly the unvaccinated should be wearing masks. Again, you have to get that policy ready. Has to be posted. You have to give it to all of your employees. And the other piece that you have to do is collect that vaccination status and make your decision. Vaccinate everybody or do the testing. So right now, that's what everybody needs to do. All the things that we've been warning you. So hopefully everybody's been listening to us, right, Mike?
Yeah, that's right. All right. So what is it that everybody needs to do now, like right now? Because my sense is, talking to customers and business owners, that we have individual businesses. It's all over the place for how much we have collected vaccination status, how much we've communicated ahead. Some people are really on top of it. Some people haven't even begun yet. What's the starting point that if you've kind of delayed thinking this thing is going to get shut down the Supreme Court and that hasn't happened, what should be at top of the list for priorities for implementation?
Right. So that's the 4 things that I just said. So it's collecting vaccination status, making the decision whether you're going to have everybody vaccinated, mandatory vaccinated, or you're going to allow for the testing option. And if you do the testing option, plan B there is, how are you going to do that testing, right? Are you going to ask everybody to do it Sunday night, Monday morning? How are you going to do that, right? And the next thing is the policy. You have to use the template that OSHA put out, customize it for your organization, post it, and give it to everybody. And then you need to have a plan for if somebody tests positive, that they cannot come into work, and how does that look for your organization. So those are the pieces of the plan that you need to get ready right now. A subset of that is that you have to make sure that if you're mandating the vaccine, you have a plan for people that ask for medical accommodations or religious accommodations. And that would be under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a federal law. And there is an interactive component to that where you need to have a discussion with the employee. We at Asure have walked many clients through this accommodation process, and we have forms that we utilize that goes to the employee to ensure and document that interactive process, and then come up with accommodations. So there's a lot of moving parts here. I don't want to minimize that. There's different components to whether you mandate the vaccine or whether you do the testing option, there are those components that I just laid out.
Hey, Mary, what about masks? I mean, it's other than being a political, lightning rod here. What obligations are there for requiring mask mandates of unvaccinated employees like today?
So unvaccinated employees should be wearing masks. As I said, you may get an employee who asks for accommodation not to wear a mask. So again, that's another interactive dialogue that you would have to get into with that employee. That would probably fall under a disability, right? They may have asthma or something like that and have a doctor's note that they can't wear a mask. And again, we've walked many clients through this. How does that look? Can they wear a shield? Can they be separated? Can they work from home? So these are the things that the employers need to look for. We're seeing a lot of accommodation requests come through. So that takes, an HR expert or even an employment attorney to help the employers make sure that there's no discrimination, that it's being done in a compliant and legal way.
Yeah, and forgive me for belaboring the point, because you rattled it off twice. Second time, even more detail. I'm hovering on this mask topic only because we just know it's so politically charged, right? And as you think about, Mary's going to talk to us a lot about documentation and tracking and testing and all that kind of stuff in a moment. But this is one that if you have records today of who is and who's not vaccinated, regardless of how you feel about it, this is simply a compliance issue. And so again, always erring on the side of following the law. Whether regardless of your personal position, regardless of the employee's personal position, this is something that you need to be able to communicate the law, not just your policy. If you want to own it and make it your policy, that's great. You can certainly do that, but you definitely need to communicate what the law says and why you're asking this of your employee. And I think that's really important context to help diffuse this. Plenty of employees are going to say, heck yeah, I agree with that law, and I can't get vaccinated for reasons X, Y, and Z, and but I will probably wear the mask. We all know that there's going to be employees who feel the exact opposite, right? And so being able to cite law as the reason that you're doing this really, I think, can diffuse and take some of the heat out of the conversation. That this isn't your policy you're implementing upon them. So, any other guidance on communication before we move to the next topic?
I mean, I think that's why the policy is so important. Honestly, it is part of the mandate, but it's important. And, I say on every webinar, and I'll continue to say it, that communication to your staff, first of all, on any issue is very important. And the transparency is also important. Why are we constituting these different regulations? And as you said, it's an ETS from the federal government. But I would also add that as an employer, you're doing this to help promote the safety of your employees, because that's the bottom line. I mean, we have a whole nother uptick in COVID cases for Omicron. And, I think employers, want to do the best thing that they can for their employees.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to our next topic then. So how do the employers comply here? And so, and maybe back up here. I think you talked about it, but so we have it's an effective now. Enforcement starts January 10th. But what is unique about the inflection point of February 9th when it comes to recording and documenting testing?
So February 9th is also when they will issue an infraction, right, or a fine. And those fines can be up to $14,000 per incident. So they're serious about it, seen by the size of those fines. And then, of course, if you have somebody who has a negative COVID test, they have to, self-isolate for the 10 days and follow the CDC recommendations for that. And what we're seeing is that employees, in states that don't pay them are really fighting this. We've seen incidents where, somehow an employee gets into the office with a negative COVID test because they did it on their own, and people find out through the grapevine. And we can't stress enough that you need to communicate to your employees that if they have a positive COVID test, they cannot come into work. And then you have to figure out and explain to them, communicate to them how they're going to be paid. So some states like New York, like California, like Massachusetts do have some triggers that can pay the employee if they have COVID. Other states do not, and that would come out of either the employee's PTO, or if the employer is feeling really generous, they may choose to do it. But they also need to document those unvaccinated people. Joan, Jane, and Sal are unvaccinated, and each week keep an Excel spreadsheet, negative, because if they're coming into work, you need to document that you have a negative test. So it goes both ways. So there is going to be some coordination that the employer needs to think about now and needs to get in place now, so that they are completely ready. It should be up and running now, but completely ready by February 9th. That's the drop dead date, but I don't want anybody to think you shouldn't be doing it now. You should. I just don't want anybody on the call to panic. We're already getting phone calls and people are panicking, and we're trying to calm them down, and let's get this in order. And it's really just an Excel spreadsheet, but how are you going to do it? How are they going to get tested? When are they going to get tested? There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, I want to spend more time on the Excel spreadsheet. So it's not like we need a scanned copy image PDF version of an actual test result that comes from a doctor or a lab, right? This is
correct.
In more detail about what is the burden on the employer. So tick mark and a date next to a name. But what about actual inspection? So if an employer was to get pressed on this in some type of an audit, an OSHA audit, what is the burden for proving that they did in fact verify before just checking boxes in the spreadsheet?
I mean, I think that checked category should say negative COVID test viewed, and I would put the initials or a signature of the person who saw that negative COVID test. So you should be seeing a negative COVID test, to be able to prove that, that employee was negative, because we have to prove that they got tested.
Yeah, and not to poke too much fun, maybe sensitive subject. I mean, I think it's important here, and this is my judgment. I'll want your feedback, Mary, that you really do have to physically see it. This can't be, Aaron Rodgers has famously said, "I've been immunized," right? So this isn't, and he wasn't vaccinated, right? And so whether you think that was awesome or terrible is irrelevant. I think from this context, that you can't just simply take your employee's word for it that they say yes, they had a negative test. You really do have to physically see it with your eyes, don't you?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And they can, take a picture with the date. They can send it to you. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that they can do it. You just have to figure out what's best for your organization.
Now, put you on the spot here, Mary. If so, a documentation is always a good thing, but with documentation comes responsibility. So if I'm an employer and I decide I'm going to go above and beyond a tick mark in a spreadsheet with a signature and an initial, and I actually take a photograph, take an image of the negative test, and I store that, that's HIPAA protected information, isn't it?
It is, but if you keep it confidentially, you could be okay. But if you have 100 employees and none of them are vaccinated and you're taking a picture once a week, that's going to be a lot of storage issues. But if you keep it confidential, you should be okay.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and move to our next topic then. I think we continue to hear questions. If you're if you're a one location, 25 person company, this is pretty black and white. If you have, 500 employees spread across some locations, this is still fairly black and white. But there are lots of companies that are kind of on the bubble. Can you kind of refresh us on the 100
Yeah,
employee rule for part-time, full-time contractors, remote workers, multi-location? There's a lot of nuance involved here.
there is. And this is definitely a question that we're getting a lot from our employers. So the first thing that you have to know is that even if you have remote workers, they're counted in the 100 employee count, but they do not need to get vaccinated. But be careful, because I had an employer call me yesterday and he goes, all my employees are remote. I said, they work from home? He says, yes. I said, do they ever see clients? Oh yeah, their job is to go into clients and set stuff up. I said, then they're not 100% remote. Remote means I sit in my house every day, right? So it doesn't mean that I'm hybrid and I'm remote some of the time. I go into the office once a week or once a month. That's not remote, that's hybrid, right? In that 100 employee count, also you would include part-time employees. So it's heads. So if you have 100 part-time employees, this rule will apply to you. Your contract workers are not counted in the 100 employee rule, but your temp workers that you own that are employed by your organization do. But a temp worker that works for a temp agency that is truly just a temporary worker for you, but paid through that temp agency, an employee of that temp agency, they do not get included into your 100 employee rule. Those are the most questions that I'm getting. And if you're teetering at 95 or, sometimes you're 101 and sometimes you're 99 employees, I would err on the side of caution and consider yourself an 100 employee organization.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so, like, if you've got one office that has 10 employees that work, at least sometime in that office, but you have 90 remote workers that are completely virtual, you have 100 employees, and those 10 are now the 90 don't have to comply because if they're truly 100% remote, but the 90 remote, 10 in an office, that puts you at the 100 mark, and those 10 have to comply, correct?
Correct. And if you've got 10 employees in 10 states and none of them are remote, you meet the requirement and they all need to comply with this mandate.
Yeah, something, maybe give, I don't know if you want to, how much guidance you want to give here, but maybe speak pros and cons. But when I think about contract workers, right? So, our executive team, we've talked about this as we contemplate our own implementation. Contract workers legally, okay, so they don't count towards the 100 employees, so that's one issue. But they also legally don't require to follow the rules of inspection and masking and vaccination. But as an employer, you can still require it, right? It's something that we've
absolutely. You own the workplace. So, I make sure that the employers that we support, besides their contract workers, that they have a plan for them. They attest every day to say that they don't have COVID, and you're allowed to ask them whether they're vaccinated or not. And if they refuse to answer, say, then you have to wear a mask every day.
Yeah,
and I would do the same for every vendor. I personally would be, uber conscious of the vendors, clients coming into the office and have, a plan for that as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk a lot about in our weekly series here is developing a culture, right?
That's right.
I think it's damaging to culture if you have one standard for your employees and a different one for contractors, if that is a lower standard for contract employees. Your employees are going to be looking over their shoulder thinking, why the heck do I have to do this? But they don't even work here, right? So they're not even an employee. So just something, just food for thought, I think, as you develop your policies. Anything else you want to add before we move to the next slide, Mary?
No, I think that's well said. Mike. Thank you.
Okay. All right. What is something that I think we haven't talked a lot about is the need for 2022 insurance plans to cover home COVID tests. Can just say more about that?
So I think that's good news. So when we talk about who pays for the testing, the mandate says that the employees need to pay for the test. That being said, there are some states that before this came into effect, they already said employers have to pay for the test, right? So that's why you always need guidance with all of these, because you've got federal and state law, and they're sort of, in some cases, banging heads with each other. But in 2022, thankfully, if you have insurance, your insurance plan should pay for your COVID test. Now that, we don't have details yet on that. So does that mean only if you have symptoms, or will it also apply for if you're just getting tested to travel or to go into your employer? So, more to be said on that, but I believe it will cover all. They want people to get tested. We want people to get tested, and make it as easy as possible. So I believe if you have insurance, the insurance is going to cover all COVID tests.
Now I'm going to start asking you insurance questions. You're going to tell me to talk to an insurance agent here, probably. But something I wonder is, when the mandate came out in September, it was November before we had OSHA guidance and implementation of the rules. Most companies had already been either in the middle of or already were largely through their open enrollment periods, where this was never contemplated, probably. So when it says 2022 requirements, is this simply a mandate on the insurance companies that
Yes.
they have to pay for, whether they plan for it or not, or is this for the next plan?
I believe it's for any plan that is active in 2022. But again, they haven't put details out yet.
Got it. Okay. So as far as we know, the expectation is, your insurance provider, whether they did or did not account for this in building and construction their plan, they're gonna by law have to cover that expense, regardless, right? That's your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's probably one that as we get more guidance will be important for employers to be able to communicate with their employees and working with their brokers. So as we get more information on that, we'll share that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Move on to our next question then. This is probably going to a smaller subset of people on the call. Probably don't have a ton of federal employees on the call because your employer is the federal government. But there's some changes here, and I think specifically with contractors, right? So if you're a company that provides services for, builds products for, you're a contractor of the federal government. There was a big swath of impacted companies and employees, but I think this is one of those areas. Maybe perhaps there's some change. Do I understand?
Yeah. So this also was challenged in the courts, and right now is stayed. And we do at Asure Consulting, HR Consulting, have some federal contractors, right? We do affirmative action plans for them, et cetera. And so right now, it went into effect before the 100 employer mandate, and then it is still stayed in the court. So this has been stopped for now, but it's under interpretation whether or not they have to apply, whether the 100-person mandate applies to them. But we believe it does not. And so right now, federal government workers or contractors do not have to fulfill the mandate as we speak. And again, everything's in flux. That's why everybody has to look at our website every single week for updates that we'll share with them.
Yeah, and do I have it right, Mary, that the kind of the underlying decision here by the courts is that they don't like things that are arbitrary, right? And so
Correct.
there was a lot of discussion around the arbitrariness. I think that's not a word probably, but the arbitrariness of the 100 employee line in the sand that was drawn, period. But saying, oh, you could be a smaller company, but if you provide services to the federal government, then it applies to you. There's no scientific correlation to their likelihood to catch or transmit COVID. That was kind of the underlying reason for that one being struck down, wasn't it?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
You have it exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm not an attorney, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, and I talk to Mary Simmons every week, so I get smarter on these things. Okay. All right. Two more topics I want to kind of unpack. And this is a common theme. So if you've attend these weekly shows, you've heard this before, but we cannot say it enough. What should employers do if state laws are different than the federal mandate, Mary?
Oh, this could be a whole seminar in itself. There's about 23 states that have their own OSHA regulations, and now the ETS is saying, okay, you guys have 15 days. We're not sure when that clock starts. Is it last Friday or before that? To either adhere to the ETS exactly as is or better than. And we do have a lot of clients in some of those 23 states, you know, Arizona, Atlanta, California, Washington, Iowa, Kentucky. I don't think we have many clients in Hawaii, but those are some of the states. So again, that's what makes all of this so confusing, is you have to integrate those state laws with the federal mandate. But those states have 15 days and counting to either comply with this ETS or come up with a measure that is even better than, meaning stricter than.
Yeah, and I think that's the real takeaway, right? So, you know, we've talked about this before on different topics that, you know, the federal government has, you know, we've originally it was, hey, what does the CDC say? But CDC doesn't have teeth for implementation. OSHA and Department of Labor does, but sometimes that doesn't agree with what, say, our governor has implemented by executive order, or our state legislature, and that might be different than, say, our county executive, and that might be different than city municipality health order, right? So
Right.
I think the best guidance we could possibly give is when laws don't, sometimes they directly contradict each other.
Right.
Or at least there's ambiguity between differences. The safest thing you can possibly do is follow the strictest, the one that errs on the side of employee safety. So whether you think it's a great law or a terrible law, an infringement on your civil liberties, from an employer perspective, our guidance to you is always err on the strictest side that provides the most safety for your employees. Anything else you'd want to add to that before we move to the next topic, Mary?
No, as always, perfectly said.
All right, thanks. All right, here's the big one, and I don't care how many Holiday Inns you stay at, you're never going to know the answer to this because we're fingers to the wind trying to predict. But you know, it's a gratuitous question. Is the legal battle settled in the courts? Maybe let's start, Mary. Where is this in the courts? This is still, we have states attorneys generals who are attorneys general, I should say, who have lawsuits in various circuit courts. There are plenty of powers that are trying to get this heard by the Supreme Court to knock this whole thing down. Let's start there. What can you tell us about what the potential legal challenges still are?
Yeah, so the Sixth Circuit Court basically lifted it, saying, hey, we don't have enough right now to keep this day, so we're lifting it, but we're still looking at it. So that's one thing. The next thing is that if it goes to the Supreme Court can say, I'm not going to hear the case, right? So they can do nothing, or they can hear the case and make a judgment. So when we say it's in flux, it is still in flux. It is still in the courts. You will still see challenges from various states as you did before. So even, and I just don't want anybody to hang their hat on that and say, oh, I'm just going to wait and see what the courts do and do nothing. I just don't think that's a good plan, because we don't know what the courts are going to do. You know, if the courts say, no, it stays, then you might, you know, really have to scramble to to adhere to everything. So we still want you to follow the recommendations that we made in the beginning of the webinar, and we've been saying all along, but we do want you to understand it is still in the courts. And, also understand, emergency temporary standard, it's only in effect for 6 months. And then it has to be reissued. So right now, even if it wasn't challenged, nothing was done, that's what an ETS is. It's a 6-month time frame. So
and Mary, when did the clock started ticking on that 6-month calendar? What, November 6th?
So that is really unclear. So when they said the stay is lifted, they really didn't go back and say, okay, this is what you should do, right? And this is when all the clocks started ticking. So that really is unclear, but I would say, you know what, I don't even want to make a judgment on that. That is still unclear. I think there's going to be some Q&As out that'll make that a little bit clearer, because we all have that same question, and you and I will definitely do a follow-up to this in the new year, and we'll get, hopefully some more information by then to help employers sort of get through the rest of this.
Yeah, so I think maybe I would wrap saying, hey, I like politics. I like newsy stuff. I watch this and try to pay attention. And so I'm not going to be surprised if this does get, shot down. I don't want to be surprised if there's action in circuit courts that impact this thing. I won't be surprised if the Supreme Court decides to pick it up. I'm not going to be surprised if the Supreme Court doesn't pick this thing up. But the only thing we know for certain right now, it is the law. And so please, 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 please do not wait to see what happens if the Supreme Court picks this thing up. Develop a policy, implement the policy, start capturing vaccination status, get a plan, and start capturing negative tests for those who are unvaccinated. If they're unvaccinated, implement the mask policy. Whether you love or hate these things, just don't wait for the courts to act, because the bottom line is today, December 22nd, this is the law of the land. And regardless of what OSHA has said for a date that they're gonna enforce this thing on the January 10th and the February 9th for when they can start putting fines out, you're gonna have employees respond to how you respond like today, right? So
Right.
Any final thoughts, Mary?
I would agree with you wholeheartedly, but the thing that I would add is that you really should have guidance on this, because what I find when we are helping clients, a lot of them are trying to contract around the law. And by that, I mean, they're like, well, I'm going to do this, but I really don't want to do that. So let us help you. When we customize any kind of policy, we have the expertise, we have the bandwidth, we have this, HR certifications to help you get through this. This is a difficult mandate to stay in compliance with, and I encourage everybody to utilize HR consulting or your employment attorneys that you may be contracted with to help you with this mandate.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mary. So I'll give you your one slide marketing pitch, but obviously this is complex. So whether you just need support for just your managers, or you need strategic help as an organization to be thinking proactively about talent management and attracting, developing, retaining talent, or you need a total outsourced HR solution without having to provide all these services, including policy handbooks and how to implement and stay compliant with this mandate amongst all the sea change of compliance requirements that's coming at us in the last 22 months. This is what we're here for. So rather than hiring a full-time HR staff or even a full-time person, that's a burden that the P&L can't handle for a lot of small companies. Outsourcing this on a fractional basis just makes all the sense in the world. And Mary's team they're certified, SHRM certified professional HR execs. So with that, I would encourage everybody, watch the previous webinars if you haven't already, but please download the book. This is a free tool for you. We don't charge for it. 25 pages of really dense content to help you get smart and then implement a policy and stay compliant around the vaccine mandates. So, Mary, I always enjoy our conversations. I get smarter every time I talk to you.
Thank
And
you.
so thanks to everybody for joining today. We are in the business of helping growing companies get better use of their capital, get the most from their teams, and stay compliant so they can grow their businesses. And until next week, we wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, a Happy Hanukkah, happy holidays to everyone. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you.